Head over to patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps and sign up for my free content page, where I'll be interacting with you, doing live streams, posting exclusive content, sending out newsletters, and dropping a major limited series podcast exclusively for Patreon members later this year. That's patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. A young school teacher is home alone, snug in bed, sound asleep. Later that night, her roommates return from a bar, only to discover an unbelievably gruesome scene. As investigators dig in, a familiar name comes up: Ted Bundy. But the case soon runs Arctic cold. Yet a cigarette butt, a monk from Thailand, and a woman who originally lied to police provide the answer to a 50-year-old mystery. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of close to 50 true crime books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Until June 1971, 24-year-old Rita Curran lived at her family home. And before moving into an old New England-style triple-decker after answering an ad in the local newspaper looking for a roommate, Rita seems content with her life of family, friends, and a job she absolutely adores. In line with her congenial demeanor and overall loving Christian spirit, Rita is the perfect fit for teaching second grade at Milton Elementary School in Burlington, Vermont. And I'll just say here that teachers, in my view, make the world go around. They are the lifeblood of society. It cannot be said enough how much respect and admiration they deserve from their communities. Without them, society is a far different place. And teachers do not by any means go into education for the money or prestige. That's for damn sure. They do it for the love of children and the job. As the end of the 1971 school year approaches, Rita begins preparing to go back to her part-time summer job at the South Burlington Colonial Motor Inn as a maid. The work supplements her income, which takes a hit during summers when school is on break. The inn sits next door to the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers, which might ring a bell if you're one of those attentive true crimers. Infamous serial killer Ted Bundy was born in the Lund home. Rita shares a similar look to many of her 1971 contemporaries and could easily fit into Bundy's preferred type of victim profile. At times, she put her dark, thick black hair up into a beehive, and at others preferred to wear it down, flowing far past her shoulders. In every photo I've seen, blue-eyed Rita embodies a calming presence and smiles, seemingly happy to be an integral part of contributing to Burlington, Vermont's community in a way she knows can make a difference. Burlington in 1971 has some 37,000 residents, which is a very large population for a town in Vermont, especially then, when the entire state stood at 450,000 people. Burlington is in northern Vermont. At the time, according to the Burlington Free Press, Vermont is, get this, quote, fearing a hippie invasion. That term meant a lot of things then, mainly young people rejecting mainstream values, living a counter-culture type of lifestyle. And the image many held was of a flower child, wearing a headband, sundress, jeans, no shirt, no shoes, cigarette hanging from their mouth, maybe smashing a tambourine from one hand to the other. Of course, LSD, mushrooms, and other hallucinogenic drugs were often associated with the hippie movement. And the poster children for the group during the previous decade could have been Charles Manson and his cult. So the hippie did not have the best reputation, to say the least. And conservative Vermont, as the 1970s come into view, seems to be frightened of what will become of the state if hippies start moving in and taking over. The Currans were perhaps a bit more cultured than native Vermonters, having moved to Milton, Vermont in the mid-1950s from Brooklyn. Still, Rita went to Mount St. Mary's Academy, a private Catholic school, which you could easily assume sheltered her from any type of negative, influential culture. The oldest, Rita has a younger brother and sister, and her family is, I would say, upper middle class, with her father working for IBM in Burlington and her mother running a local diner the family owns. So they were well-educated, well-respected, well-liked, and got along with everyone in town. The house Rita and her new roommates live in has a second and third floor apartment as well, a triple-decker split into rentable spaces. If you're from New England, you've seen these houses. They're everywhere. The house itself sits on a suburban street with many similar houses lined up and down the block. It's clean, it's friendly, it's typical New England living. People get up, go to work and school, come home, spend the weekends at the lake, or walking through the center of town, maybe a fall fair with maple syrup candy and cider donuts, and that breathtaking fall foliage dotting the background of their lives in the autumn months. The one thing people in most of Vermont don't worry about is violent crime. It's just not part of their everyday experience. Sure, the oddball attack or robbery takes place, but it's very rare. Within the entire state of Vermont in 1970, there were 6 recorded murders, just 5 in 1971. Yet, that being said, it will soon all change in the coming months as a rash of violence against women begins in Burlington. Being from Milton, which is about a half hour north of Burlington, heading up towards St. Albans City, another half hour or so, and you are in Canada. Burlington feels like a bit much for Rita. She is used to the laid-back, slower pace of country living Milton offers. In fact, having been at the new apartment only a few weeks into that June, Rita doesn't really know her roommates that well and is only just now starting to come out of her shell. Beyond that, she kept herself busy after school practicing with the church choir and is also part of one of those barbershop quartet groups, a cappella. With school well into vacation, on the evening of July 19th, 1971, Rita is with that barbershop group in Burlington practicing into the late evening hours. There had been a few tense moments at the house before July 19th. Rita was home one night alone inside her bedroom. The phone rang. After picking up, all she heard was a man on the other end, breathing heavily. It's unnerving and scary, sure. Then again, it could be just kids messing around. Prince Albert in a can type of thing. Is your refrigerator running? Rita lives a busy life, of course, with her passion for singing dominating her free time, but also graduate courses she has been taking at the University of Vermont. She wasn't about to sit around during summer and wait for school to start. She wanted to do things. On the night of July 19th, Rita is home by herself. Living above her, in the middle apartment, or second floor, are several young women. Upstairs, on the third floor, is a guy named Bill DeRuse and his new wife, Michelle. They are at home. Yet, there can be no doubt, considering how thin the walls and floors are in the house, that maybe everyone awake that night heard the DeRuse arguing. They had been married just 2 weeks, and things did not seem to be going all that well. After the fight, Bill DeRuse slams the door and shouts that he is going for a walk to clear his head and get some fresh air. Rita had gotten home about 10 p.m. that night after her barbershop quartet practice. As she arrives, 2 of her roommates, a woman and her boyfriend, are on their way out the door for some food and drinks. It had been a long day for Rita. After getting home, she immediately starts to get ready for bed. She put her hair up in curlers, changed into her night clothes, and settled into her bed around midnight. Just before then, her other roommate, who had not left with the others, decides to head out and meet them at the bar. "I'll see you," she tells Rita. They share a bedroom together. Exhausted, Rita falls asleep. Somewhere close to 1:30 a.m., her roommates come back from the restaurant. It's quiet in the house, as it should be at this time of night. The roommate heads into her room, quietly trying to open the door so as not to wake Rita up. But there seems to be a problem. Something is obstructing the door as she pushes it in. Within a minute or so, Rita's roommate realizes something is not right. And as she looks over toward Rita's side of the room, terror washes over her at the sight of what she sees, and she screams. Running out of the room, it's clear they need to call 911 immediately. That's a good cliffhanger, so let's take a break here and come right back. If true crime is part of your daily routine, you need to check out this podcast, Morning Cup of Murder. Every single day, Karina B. Mazdifer delivers a new true crime case. No banter, no fluff, just straight to the story. With over 2,000 episodes and 40 million downloads, there's a reason listeners keep going back. Some cases you'll recognize, others you won't, but you'll always be engaged. So if you need a true crime quick fix, search for Morning Cup of Murder wherever you get your podcasts and add it to your lineup of shows. Discovering a murder victim, especially someone you know and live with, snaps a person into a sort of present moment shock. They can generally tell you exactly what they saw, what time, and describe their movements just previous to that discovery. Those details might not be 100% accurate based on the trauma they've suffered, but they do recall each moment fairly vividly in an almost robotic fashion. The Burlington Fire Department ambulance is the first to arrive at 17 Brooks Avenue. Just behind them is the first responding officer from the Burlington Police Department. Nobody in the house has any idea what happened inside Rita's room. All they know is that the scene is horrific. As the officer approaches the house and walks in, an EMT emerging from Rita's room says, "She's deceased. We checked for a pulse, tried to raise her eyelids, felt her hand, which is quite stiff." The officer heads in to have a look, checks to see if Rita is breathing, confirms she is not, and then leaves the room. Rita is on the floor, nude. Her clothing is kind of balled up and stuffed between her legs, which are spread eagle, according to the responding officer's report. She's on her back, her face is covered with blood on the left side, and it appears to be quite swollen and discolored. Rita Curran was murdered in her room and attacked as she was sleeping. 3 detectives then arrive. There seems to be no sign of forced entry into the house, yet it is not unheard of at this time, especially in Burlington, to go to bed without locking the doors and, in the heart of summer, leaving the door open. The screen door can offer that fresh, cool breeze of night air, very much welcomed. No doubt Rita has been sexually assaulted, considering that her pajamas are all torn up as if her attacker ripped them off her body. She also fought with her attacker aggressively, and police on the scene make a point to take fingernail clippings for that very reason. Of course, normal crime scene collection at the time is done. The linens from her bed, blood and other bodily fluids found on and around Rita's body, and any trace evidence discovered that they deem important. One item they discover is a cigarette butt found underneath Rita's right arm near her elbow, which was somewhat squashed by her arm, but still intact. And there is also some ash from the cigarette on the floor nearby. What's interesting, and also very telling, is that the cigarette appeared to have burned itself out. Scattered around the room are those hair curlers Rita routinely wore to bed, which again tells investigators Rita likely put up a strong fight. And when they stand back inside the room and take a look at the overall picture, the entirety of the scene speaks of a struggle. The curtains are on the floor, clearly having been torn down from the rod above. The bed is ajar from the wall where her roommate says Rita kept it pushed up against. And some of the other furniture is strewn about. So there was a fight for survival on Rita's part. No doubt about it. Ultimately, the medical examiner's office comes out and says Rita was strangled to death. Also, violently raped. Her face and sections of her body beaten savagely. And it's almost a certainty that myriad situations could have taken place. And the suspect pool is vast and wide. The roommate's boyfriend would have to be considered. Any neighbors, passers-by, a random attack by a random person traveling through town, a local hippie, stoned out of his gourd on whatever drug is going around. There are any number of possibilities Burlington police need to contend with and take seriously. The one thing for sure is their determination to solve the case before a second attack occurs. This was a brazen crime committed by someone who certainly has done it before and will likely do it again. So there is this ticking clock feeling among law enforcement. This once peaceful, safe neighborhood in town has been thrown off its axis and no one feels safe anymore just going out to the store at night, which is, I should point out, a side effect of violent crime we don't much talk about. The fear the community feels after such a vicious attack takes place in your backyard. The fundamental right we all have to go out or stay in and not worry about some psychopath or sociopath stepping into our world looking to destroy it. Someone gets violently raped and murdered while sound asleep in their own bed can erode the trust and overall friendliness neighbors once had for one another. Suddenly, you notice that quiet neighbor, or that kid in the neighborhood who seems a bit off. You question and you judge anyone who looks different. You go about your day with your eyes wide open and your senses heightened. Your entire world is thrown off kilter. Of course, none of that compares in any way to the absolute horror and disbelief Rita's family is now going through. They are, of course, devastated. How could this happen in Burlington, Vermont? How could someone come into a house with 4 people and commit such a crime and just walk away? Who could have done this? How did they know Rita was home alone? Had she been stalked? Had someone from one of her singing groups developed an affection, an obsession with her? So there's many questions, which leads to what? Many suspects, many situations that could have happened. Burlington police call on the state police to come in and help out, which is the state police's role in many states, including my own, Connecticut. The state police have more resources and detectives specializing in this type of investigation. Plus, the sheer depth and magnitude of the investigation and how many people they need to speak to calls for outside help in a huge way. Just above where Rita and her roommates live on the first floor of the house, in the middle apartment, those women who live together were all home. Detectives tried to wake them up that night, but have no luck. Above them, which is actually the 3rd floor, is where Bill DeRuse and his newlywed wife Michelle live. Detectives finally speak to the women directly above Rita, and they claim not to have seen or heard anything, which I guess isn't all that strange. With more than 10 people living in this one house, at any given time there is noise and someone coming and going. You kind of get used to those routine sounds of life and squelch them out without even trying. So a bump in the night, an argument, a shout, a stereo turned up too loud, a dog barking, it all becomes the soundtrack to life, and your senses learn to ignore it all. You're not expecting somebody to be murdered in a nearby apartment. So why would you hear anything that might make a difference unless it's an outright plea for help or A curdling scream you know is not somebody overreacting to something. Upstairs, the first responding officer knocks on the DeRuse's door. 31-year-old Bill DeRuse answers. Bill has this hippie vibe look to him, for sure. Big, bushy, curly hair, a skinny frame, and he sometimes wears one of those thin headbands, like a flower child. Bill also prides himself in the practice of Buddhism. He'd moved to Vermont from San Francisco and was part of the Buddhist movement out there. The officer asks the DeRuses if they saw or heard anything, where they were, and if they had gone out. We were home all night, Bill DeRuse says. Didn't see or hear anything. That right, ma'am, the officer asks. Mrs. DeRuse. She hesitates. Yes, sir. Perhaps she didn't want to cause her husband any problems, or she had just forgotten. But Bill had lied to the police, and so had Mrs. DeRuse, in effect, covering for him. If you recall, Bill had gone out for a walk to get some fresh air after he and the missus had that fight. They had just told the police they were inside all night and never left. After that police officer leaves the DeRuses, Bill and Michelle have a little chat. It was best, Bill says, that they stayed out of this situation. Before that officer had even come up to speak with them, Bill sat his wife down and explained something. Listen, he says, I was arrested once, had some trouble, and if they find out I was outside walking, they will accuse me of this. So you need to back me up and tell them I was home with you. Apparently, she took that advice. Bill is relieved after the officer says thanks and he leaves. So much so, he sits down at the kitchen table, wipes his head in his hands, and then he lights up a smoke, takes a huge pull, and exhales. Detectives confirmed that Rita's roommates were all at a local bar, the Harbor Hideaway. They were there until about 12:30 a.m., headed home, and that's when that one roommate discovered Rita. As Rita's case becomes cold over the next several weeks with no actual leads that seem at all promising, Bill DeRuse decides to leave his wife, Michelle. But he doesn't take off to New Hampshire or another town in Vermont, not even out west to San Francisco or Oregon, where Michelle will ultimately settle herself. Instead, Bill DeRuse heads to Thailand, joins a monastery, and begins studying to become a monk. So, as Bill is dedicating his life to silent contemplation, prayer, maybe celibacy and inner peace, years go by back in Burlington, and there is still no solid person of interest in Rita's murder. The case just kind of peters out and ends up in a box in a cold storage room, collecting frost. That is, until an investigator steps in many years later and discovers that none other than Ted Bundy was likely in Vermont at the time of Rita's brutal beating, rape, and murder. I'll be right back after this final break. I just want to be clear about something. That from the moment of this murder and for many months and years after, the Burlington police and state police did a very thorough job investigating every lead that came in and they developed. I don't want to leave you thinking that they threw up their hands and did nothing after that initial investigation. They had plenty of forensic evidence, DNA, etc., but that evidence doesn't mean much during an era when science hasn't yet caught up to catching killers in the way it will in the ensuing decades. In fact, In the supplemental report of the case, it states this: the suspect list continued to grow as decades continued to pass. And all of that work they did early on would not be done in vain. It truly sets up the foundation for eventually solving this case. Rita Curran was one of those people in life that pass by and make an impact. The current chief of the Burlington Police Department says she was a talented person who touched the lives of all who knew her, a teacher and a singer and a giver who was loved. The chief adds that Rita's murder left a stain on the community, and Rita's family has waited 5 decades, 50 years, for the hand of justice to be served to Rita's killer. As talk of Ted Bundy's potential involvement and rumor of him being in town at the time of Rita's murder stirred in the 1980s, one of Rita's sisters decides to take matters in that regard into her own hands. She writes a letter to Bundy as he awaits execution. Her hope is that Bundy will make one last confession and give the family some peace. Rita's sister comes right out with it in her letter. Did you murder my sister? They wait and they wait and they wait some more. Bundy never writes back, but the family does hear from the FBI. An agent contacts them and explains they have spoken to Bundy about Rita's case, and he would not confirm or deny that he committed her murder. There's good old Teddy Boy, a genuinely perpetual scumbag right up until his final breath. The guy could have said yes or no. Bundy fits into the MO of Rita's murder, certainly. The way in which Rita was murdered, the home invasion type of crime it was maybe, and certainly what was a very violent sexual assault. Add to that Bundy being born next door to where Rita worked her summers and how much Rita had in common looks-wise with Bundy's victim pool, and I guess you could consider Bundy a suspect. Though it's easy for me to say in hindsight, I would not have placed Bundy anywhere near the top of the list, as I am sure none of the detectives investigating the case over the years ever did. Why? Because for Bundy to come all the way back to where he was born and hang around long enough to have even run into Rita and then decide to stalk and kill her just doesn't seem like a manner which he would follow. The stars would have to align for them to bump into each other, and in all likelihood, Bundy didn't even know Rita existed, if he was even in town at the time. Rita's murder has the feeling of someone local, someone who would have run into Rita, someone who would have had the opportunity to become obsessed with her and then follow her home to learn where she lives, or someone in the neighborhood, a stalker. There in the shadows, no one would ever suspect or feel the least bit worried or threatened by being around. The one lead the Burlington police have, which will ultimately solve this case, sat in an evidence bag for 50 years, waiting there for the moment when technology and DNA sequencing caught up to it. That Lark brand cigarette butt they found at the scene under Rita's arm. Rita didn't smoke. Her roommates didn't smoke. The ashes from the butt tell the story of someone being in that room on that night with a lit cigarette. That would be Rita's killer, for certain. And that person's DNA would be inside the filter of that cigarette butt. So DNA from the cigarette butt was extracted and sent into all the databases. Incidentally, before this, they had found male DNA in several blood samples from Rita's clothing and other DNA from Rita's panties. Mostly everyone they had on radar, including sketchy Bill DeRuse, whom they had eyed early on as a very good person of interest, had been ruled out as a contributor. But then, in 2023, things start coming together. Still hot on Bill DeRuse, they obtain a DNA sample from one of his brothers. That sample and the sample from the Lark cigarette butt are a 97.03 match. When they went back to the reports and interviews with DeRuse and his wife, they wondered why his wife would say that he had never left the house that night. if it is now clear that DeRuse likely raped and murdered Rita. The science proves he was inside Rita's room. That's it. That's a fact. So they track down the wife to where she was living in Oregon and ask her if she wants to revisit her statement. I lied, she tells them. He did leave the house. Bill was intimidating, very tall, a chronic storyteller, and I found this fact to be interesting. He was missing part of his left pinky finger. He was one of 7 boys. He had also been in prison twice for armed robbery. I was never scared of him, the ex-wife says. He never got physical with me. He didn't drink or use drugs. He was a serious Buddhist. She also tells them that she had gone to bed that night and did not know when Bill returned from his walk after their fight. Information that would have been great to have back in 1971 when the case broke. In a 2023 press conference, Burlington Police Corporal Tom Shinnett explained that DeRuse's wife was young and naive and in love at the time. Newly married, they understood her trepidation to give up her husband and cause him problems. She, in turn, said she never suspected her husband of committing the murder. Bill DeRuse came back to the States in 1974 and settled in San Francisco. He met another woman, got married a second time. That second wife claims that he stabbed a woman in front of her in her side, and he also once stabbed her and strangled her to the point of her almost passing out. So the guy was a violent shitbag, period. There's no indication that he committed another murder, but that doesn't mean anything to me. He did it once, we know of. He killed Rita Curran. He raped Rita Curran. A guy like DeRuse has an urge to settle the anger demons within him with violence. So I would bet there are other victims of his out there. The irony is that he chased Buddhism all his life, putting on this facade of peace and unity and inner dialogue and spirituality, when he himself was the total opposite. They couldn't question DeRuse or get him to admit to Rita's murder because he was found dead himself in a hotel room in 1986 from an overdose of drugs. Drugs that he never took, his ex-wife said, if you recall. Good riddance, I say. Karma came back around to slap the life out of that mother. That's going to do it for this week. And I want to say thank you for responding to my call and sending in stories you want me to cover. I'm going through them all and will be featuring several in the coming months. So keep sending them in. I'm here. I'm listening. Also, very soon, I'm going to start answering some of your questions. I had asked you to send in questions you would like me to answer during the program, and that's coming soon. There's one question that lots and lots of you have been sending in, and I think I'm ready to answer it. Please spread word about our show on social media and word of mouth, of course. And subscribe to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions truly help. I could not do this show without you. And that support, I must tell you, means everything to me personally. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each of you for listening. I mean this. You have a lot of choices out there, and I'm grateful you've landed on Crossing the Line. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it and bring you the content you want. If you go to crossingtheline.biz, mwilliamphelps.com, or look in the show notes, you can contact me to suggest cases or just say hello. Please look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol in my name, M. William Phelps. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for the episode include: she was strangled in her bedroom with no witnesses. Some suspected Ted Bundy, by Sean Newman, People Magazine, March 23rd, 2025. Rita Curran murder solved. Lily St. Angelo, Burlington Free Press. Mystery in the Mountain. Rita Curran's murder is Burlington's oldest cold case. By Libby Farrell, Fox 44, July 26, 2021. Burlington Police Department Supplementary Investigation Report, Rita Curran Murder, 2023. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.